Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another Ask the Doctor. I am Shamira with Grapevine Health, and Grapevine Health is a health media company. And as you know, or might not, our mission is to deliver relatable, easy to understand health information that you can always trust. And one of the ways we do that is with our Ask the Doctor sessions. We want you to have a chance to ask whatever you want, your questions, and get answers right here, right now, in real time. Before we get started with that, you'll notice a QR code on your screen. If you use that QR code, take your phone, scan that QR code, it'll take you to a quick survey. Now, this survey will ask you a few questions just to make sure that we are addressing all of your concerns, making sure the program is going to your liking. But take a moment to complete that. And if you are a Fairfax County resident, then you have an opportunity to get up to $40 for sharing your thoughts with us. So please, again, you see that little QR code in your screen right there? Take a picture of that and take a moment to complete that. So while you are doing that, I will introduce our topic for today. So I know we are getting close to the end of November, but November is National Diabetes Month. So today we're going to be talking all about how to better understand your blood sugar, ways to manage your blood sugar. And I have two very special guests to help us do that. So the first person that I want to take a moment to introduce would be Valerie. She is representing one of our community partners, the Church of the Living God in Northern Virginia. So Valerie is going to be the one making sure that all of your questions get asked today, and she's going to help us keep the conversation flowing. The next person that I want to introduce is our expert, Dr. Kayla Cunningham. She will be answering those questions in real time. So I will give them both an opportunity to introduce themselves, share a little bit about who they are with you all, and then we will get to answer some questions. So before I do that, just know you'll see your little chat box there. So if you do have a question that you would like to ask, all you have to do is type it into that chat box, press submit or enter, and it will come right to us. So without further ado, take it away.
Hey everyone, my name is Valerie Ajaman. I am a women's health dietitian, and I'm really excited about today's conversation because we're talking about diabetes and so many people are affected by this. So let's just, jump right in. But Dr. Kayla, I know you want to tell us a little bit about yourself also.
Yes, so I was originally from Jamaica, but my family came up when I was in elementary school. So I grew up in the States and went to medical school at Columbia in New York City, and then was in the Maryland area for about 15 years because I trained at Hopkins at their endocrinology department and worked in community practices for the last 15 years up until about a year or so ago, where I started with a telehealth program that does 100% diabetes care.
Thank you so much for sharing a little bit about yourself, Dr. Kayla. So I'm really excited for today's conversation. So let's just jump right in because I know we don't have all the time in the world, and I know there's a lot of people watching that have burning questions. So let's get right into it. According to the American Diabetes Association, also known as the ADA, 37 million of individuals living in the United States have diabetes. So that's about 11.3% of the US population. And about 23% of adults are undiagnosed, and it's especially prevalent in communities of colors. So I want to start with the basics. Tell us first, what is diabetes? You know, what is going on in the body when you have it? If you can kind of simplify it for our audience here today.
Okay, so diabetes, the reason why an endocrinologist is one of the part of the team that takes care of diabetes is because it has a lot to do with a hormone. We do hormone medicine, and insulin is a hormone that helps the body control its sugars and helps you turn your food into energy. And what diabetes is when either you're eating too much certain types of food or you don't have enough insulin to keep up with it, so that the body can't turn all that food into energy and actually turns all the sugar floating around in your bloodstream, ends up doing damage to your body. So it's an imbalance of starches and sugars and the insulin that's supposed to help you take care of it.
So when I hear of diabetes, I hear type 1, I hear type 2, I hear pre-diabetes, I even hear gestational diabetes. So what is the difference? Because it can get pretty confusing.
It does get confusing because sometimes people think type 1 are the people who use insulin, but that's true, but also people with type 2 use insulin. So the differences between these is that someone with type 2 diabetes still makes insulin, but they've either gotten to a size or they're eating a certain amount of carbs or starches that their body can't keep up with. So if you have type 2, you might start taking medications for that, or and insulin might be one of those medications, but your body still makes a lot of insulin. It actually is able to make extra insulin. So you don't even need to get down to some mythical ideal body weight. You just need to get down to, or men or your food choices need to get down to the place where your body can keep up. People with type 1 diabetes don't make any insulin, zero insulin. If they don't take an insulin shot, they will actually get sick. They can go into the hospital with a diabetic coma and they can waste away and die. And some people think of that as juvenile diabetes because people can get diagnosed with that when they're 5, 10, when they're younger. But it actually can happen at any age. So I've diagnosed patients in their 50s, 60s, 70s with type 1 juvenile, but not really juvenile diabetes because I mean, I have a patient who was 100 pounds soaking wet, not in bad shape, but she just started wasting away, getting thirsty, using the bathroom all the time. No matter what she ate, her body couldn't keep it on. She had type 1, brand new type 1 diabetes. And even a family member of mine had the same thing. So usually if somebody gets diagnosed with diabetes as an adult, their doctor might put them on metformin or some other diabetes medication, but none of that works because if you have type 1 diabetes, no pill will work. You need insulin, and not even a lot of it, just a tiny bit, but that little bit can go a long way. Your body just needs enough to actually put away the food you eat. But if you have type 1 diabetes, you could wake up in the morning, fast all day long, and your sugars can be 300, where normal is around 100. But type 2 diabetes, you can exercise and lose your weight and not need to take any insulin at all and be just fine. And gestational is when you get it for pregnancy. And recent research has suggested that that's really kind of like a pre-diabetes because it's kind of a warning sign that under stress, like a stress test, under more physiological, medical, your body's demands more, then you need insulin. But then once you deliver the baby, like the next day, you don't need any medication. But it's a warning sign that if push comes to shove, you could, somewhere in your genetic deck of cards, is this risk for getting diabetes later on.
So we just received a question in the chat. I've heard, this is from Shatira, I've heard that metformin is not a good drug for people of color. Should folks of color advocate for injectable insulin over metformin? Or can you speak to this rumor? Is it even true?
So I am definitely a less is more person. I don't like recommending medications if somebody doesn't need medication. If there's something else we can do. One of my favorite studies, actually, so I'm glad you asked the question. One of my favorite studies is this called Diabetes Prevention Program. And they took, I think it was around 3,000 people all around the country, and half the group, they gave metformin, and the other half they told to go do 30 minutes of something aerobic, whatever's aerobic for you, a brisk walk counts, 5 days a week. So 5 days a week of just a little bit of exercise, nothing intense, and metformin, like a full dose of metformin. Both groups did better. The group that did the exercise did better than the group that got the prescription. And that was regardless of weight. So it wasn't like a weight loss effect because exercise works the day that you do it. So there definitely, if there are natural ways to go about it without taking the metformin, I look for all the other options. But because every medication is going to have a side effect and a risk. Metformin, for example, a lot of people get nauseous, loose stools, stomach upset. If that does happen, there's an extended release version ER or XL that'll be easier on your stomach. So if that's happening to you, ask for it. But for some people, even the extended release might be tough to take. And if that's the case, yeah, ask your doctor for a different option, because it's not so powerful that it's worth suffering through to take that metformin, especially when a 30-minute walk is more powerful than that metformin. It can put a strain on your body. Of all the different diabetic medications, insulin actually has the least side effects. So if I know somebody's really worried about liver or kidneys or anything, it's insulin. That's why we use it to treat women who are pregnant with diabetes or high sugars, because we know that's going to be the safest for the baby and the mom.
Okay, so let's take it
But
a
it's
step
better
back.
to take it. It's better to take it though than to have an uncontrolled sugar, because the risks of a high sugar in your system, that's what leads to family members who've lost toes and legs and blindness. So it's better to take metformin or something else if it sits wrong with your stomach, than to not take it at all, because not taking it at all and having uncontrolled diabetes is definitely the higher risk. That will definitely end up on the wrong side of the street.
Yeah, and I want to talk more about how we can better manage diabetes. But who is at risk for diabetes? Like, what are some of the risk factors to look for? You mentioned weight earlier. You also mentioned that, people with type 1, they're called, juvenile individual. And so can you share a little bit more about who is at risk? Does genetics have to do with it?
It's interesting because the kids or even adults who get type 1, the one where your body makes no insulin, they're less likely to have any family history. Like it's kind of like a strike of lightning. Although what they'll have maybe is a family history of autoimmune diseases like thyroid, lupus, things like that. So it's in type 1 diabetes is an autoimmune condition. So you might not have anyone in your family who has diabetes, but you will have someone who has MS or lupus or rheumatoid arthritis or hypothyroidism. So there might be other autoimmune things happening. Type 2 is a kind of thing that does run in lots of families. So if your mother, brother, sister, uncle, grandparents have diabetes, chances are you're in your genetic deck of cards is that risk for type 2 diabetes. But it's not inevitable. Whether or not that card plays out has a lot to do with the environment that you put it in. So if that environment has all the wrong foods, not too much of certain foods, then it's definitely going to play out. But if you sort of feed it healthier foods or healthier routines, like good sleep, a good walk, then that you can tuck that card back into your genetic deck of cards. So it's has a lot to do with family and weight for the most part.
Okay, I want to hear from those who are watching. Have you heard of A1C before? But Dr. Kayla, A1C, A1C, it seems to be this very important health marker that physicians use to diagnose diabetes. So can you break down what A1C is and what range it should be in?
Yeah, no, a lot of people just get that number thrown around, but there's a reason and that it doesn't get explained a lot. So an A1C is a percentage of your blood that is sticky with sugar. So say your body can make a certain amount of insulin, you eat something that it can't keep up with, and it can only put a certain amount into your bloodstream, into your muscles. So you have all this extra sugar floating around. And I want to point out that it's not just sugar. So when people say sugar, they think of sweet and candy and cake, but your body turns any starch, bread, potatoes, it does not see that any differently from a cupcake. So you eat a Subway sandwich or something like that. So that's a lot of bread. And you have a slice of pie or cupcake. Your body does not know the difference between that Subway sandwich and that pie. In your body, it's all carbs. It comes in and it just turns into sugar in your bloodstream. So anyway, the percentage of your blood that is sticky with sugar is your A1C. So if we all need some kind of carbs and sugar to power some things. So a healthy amount is around 4 to 5% of your body, of your blood that's sticky with sugar. So if you have extra sugar floating around, it's not getting processed, then more of your blood is hanging around in that sugary space. And the more it gets sugary. So now instead of 4%, it's 7%, 8%, 10%, 15%. That's where people say you need insulin immediately, because that sticky blood, now that 10% of your blood is sticky with sugar, it can't flow. So it can't flow through the tiny arteries that supply your kidneys or your eyes or your heart. It's getting stuck, it's sticky. So that A1C number matters because it tells you how at risk you are of things getting sticky and stuck and running into heart attacks or kidney problems, because that blood's not flowing, it's not circulating like it needs to.
Yeah, I've seen A1C levels of like 10, 11 in practice. And most of the time they had no idea they had diabetes. So, I mentioned earlier that 23% of the adult population are undiagnosed, and that's very significant. It tells us that a lot of people are just walking around with diabetes, they don't even know. So, yeah, what are some of those signs and symptoms to look out for?
I think being tired is just sort of like an American state of mind. Like, we're all tired, we all probably doing too much, but um, fatigue, so extra fatigue, you just cannot stay awake. You're thirsty all the time. You're urinating, peeing all the time. You get blurred vision. Sometimes people notice it in their feet first because they get like a stinging or a burning or a numbness that's happening in their feet. Erectile dysfunction, because those are also tiny arteries that need circulation. And when that is not getting good circulation, it's kind of a canary in the coal mine. So for some people, that's their first sign. But those are the main things. And what sometimes happens is this vicious cycle where someone's thirsty all the time. So they go for something like Gatorade because they feel like they're dehydrated, but the full sugar Gatorade makes everything worse. And so they just end up drinking sugary stuff to combat that thirst until they end up in the hospital with a sugar of 500.
Wow, I did not know about that, or even the erectile dysfunction. That's something new for me. So, to those who are watching, men, you need to understand those signs and symptoms, and also pay attention. Okay, so today we see a lot of information online that makes very strong health claims like, this product can reverse your diabetes, or take this tea to lower your A1C. I've seen, I have some diet questions I'm going to ask you later, but is diabetes reversible? Is that a myth?
It is not a myth. Part of the reason why I kind of went to a different, less traditional practice, because traditional medicine changes slowly, but it's really not rocket science. If you think of it, like, there are a lot of people who understand lactose intolerance. If I have milk, I get gas, I get stomach ache, I get loose stools. So some people stop drinking milk, and then other folks take lactate. I'm not saying that's right or wrong. Whatever helps with the situation is what's important. But diabetes is kind of similar. So if you are eating certain things that send your sugars up and put you at risk of a heart attack, you can take a medicine, or you could stop eating as much of the things. And I have been delighted to see when people say, okay, fine, because I can picture these folks' face. There was a guy who's used to come and see me with his wife. His wife had very severe diabetes, was on a lot of shots of insulin. So she needed to see me like every couple of months. He had pre-diabetes, so slightly high sugars, but not in the danger zone that causes heart attacks or kidney failure. So he wasn't on any medicine. And every time I saw him, she would bring him in to her appointments and say he needs a checkup too. And I'd say, you're fine. Now let's talk about you talk to the wife about her insulin. And then one summer he showed up and his A1C had gone from 6, which is pre-diabetes, up to 8.5, 8.5%. I said, what did you do? He's like, I'm not doing anything different. We still, every morning, we still go to McDonald's. I still get my breakfast sandwich. I didn't start any new snacks. Nothing changed, except he had started with the sweet tea at McDonald's for the summer. So one sweet tea, that's all he would have, one a day. But that one sweet tea a day was enough to bring him from pre-diabetes way past safe diabetes. And I said, well, we could start medication, but are you like committed to the sweet tea? Can you just go back to what you were drinking before? And he said, yeah, no, it's not a big deal. I'm not like addicted to it. So he stopped the sweet tea. Everything else in his diet was the same. He didn't start exercising and he went back to pre-diabetes. So type 2 diabetes, the one where your body still makes insulin, can be reversed if you cut back on the things that that you have an intolerance for. That is kind of like lactose intolerance. You have a carb intolerance. And so your body, so you start to make the portions of starches and carbs smaller, but it is reversible. I've seen people go from 15. A guy walked in, I said, you have to start insulin. This is an emergency. And he said, what do I have to do? And then he had a routine where he would have a case of beer. And when you have a case of beer a week, he would have snacks, nachos, all the snacks with the beer. They kind of went hand in hand. So he actually stopped the case of beer habit, but then the snacks went with that. And he went from 15 to 6 within a year. And all he did was cut out those high carb things, and he started a walk a day at lunchtime. So he never was on the insulin, actually. He did that all naturally, and it's possible, but it requires discipline over motivation because we don't always feel like it. But if you do it anyway, if you'd rather do the walk than the medicine, then it will definitely get you there, and it's reversible. I love that. I love stopping medication. It's my favorite part of the week.
I love stories like that. And the dietitian in me had to Google how many teaspoons of sugar are in a McDonald's sweet tea, and it's 18 teaspoons. That's a lot. And to have that every day.
It's a lot.
Wow. I'm sure it's good though. It's been a while since I had a McDonald's sweet tea. Okay. So, let me just think back to, some people get newly diagnosed, which it can be very, scary, overwhelming. What would you tell a newly diagnosed person? Because it can be kind of challenging to navigate with, this new life with diabetes. So tell us, what are the first steps to take? Who needs to be on their healthcare team? What would you say to that person?
I would say I would remind them, because I think there are actually some doctors too who think that diabetes is permanent and inevitable, and they don't give someone a chance to change habits. They'll say like, okay, here's your medicine, and then next time I see you, I'll add another one. But I would say try not to get too intimidated. It is something that you can control. It is not something that you can ignore. It will not go away if you turn your back on it. It will attack you. So you have to face it and handle it and manage it. And part of that is knowing where you stand, knowing what your A1C is. And actually the hardest thing is for a lot of people is checking their finger sticks. So knowing what your sugar is. And making small changes. So small changes go a big way. Like that one drink a day made a big difference. So maybe if you already have some a dinner, which usually has some chicken and some vegetables and some rice, maybe you start making that vegetable portion larger and that rice portion a lot smaller. It actually, is possible and it can be filling. And if you don't believe it, you have to try it before you deny it. But just small changes can make a big difference. Like you don't need to go out and start training in a marathon. You can make those small changes in how you eat. Say you don't want to change a single thing about what you eat. but you're willing to take a walk. Like, take that small change, and maybe 30 minutes feels like a lot. Start with 10 minutes. But small changes go a long way, and it's reversible. But not if you ignore it.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. But how about, building that healthcare team? Who needs to be
Oh, the
on that?
team. Well, I've definitely met primary care doctors who I'm super triple impressed with, who know the ins and outs of diabetes. And most primary care doctors, internal medicine doctors, family doctors do a great job, and know the pills and know the medications. But I think when you start to get into insulin is when again, there's some primary care doctors who are great at managing insulin, but if I had family that were starting on insulin, I would want to have, they should have an endocrinologist on the team. In addition to that, part of the routine care for diabetes is having your eyes checked once a year. And that's because if the sugars are high, since the circulation in the eyes are compromised because of the sugary blood, it tries to build extra blood vessels. And those extra blood vessels start coming in, and that's what eventually part of what can lead to blindness. But the eye doctor can see it out here before it's here and blocking your vision. So if you see the eye doctor once a year, she can treat it before it's a problem for you. So you should see your eye doctor once a year, whether or not you think you have a vision problem. And it's also helpful to see a podiatrist, a foot doctor, because if your feet are numb, you might have, again, I have plenty of family who've had this. You might step on something and it didn't hurt, and you haven't, it's a kind of awkward position to try to see that one part of your feet. And so you might not know that you have something that's been dug in there and is now a problem. So you should see a foot doctor regularly, an eye doctor at least once a year. And if you're on insulin, you should see an endocrinologist if you can find one. The wait will be hard because there's just not enough of us, but usually the average wait is somewhere around 3 months, but it's worth the wait to have somebody who knows insulin or other sophisticated medications like the back of your hand. Like, there's some medications that can help control sugars and help you with weight loss. I'll mention that because I don't think people get to hear about that either too often. It's a medication that came from a lizard's saliva, but it's a shot. It's a non-insulin shot you can take once a week, and it's rewrapped and relabeled. It is used as a weight loss medication. But if you don't have diabetes, if you don't have diabetes, your insurance company is not going to pay for it because it's considered cosmetic. But if you do have diabetes, you can take this medication and control your blood sugars and lose weight. So the group of those medications are called GLP-1s. And so an endocrinologist specialist might be more familiar with all the different available options. Once you start getting into insulin or any shot, it's probably worth talking to one.
Okay, so you mentioned blindness, some nerve damage, especially in the feet. What other complications? Kidneys, is kidney function, is that also linked in any way?
Yeah, so tiny vessels in the eyes are similar to the tiny vessels in the that supply oxygen to the kidneys. So uncontrolled diabetes is, along with high blood pressure, is probably the number one cause of kidney failure, dialysis in our community.
Okay, thanks for answering. So I want to break for a second and take a question from the chat. This is from Mr. Francis Jima. If diabetes causes erectile dysfunction, can men who experience erectile dysfunction reverse it once they treat their diabetes? That's a really good question.
Yeah, no, it's a function of how much is circulating, right? So it's not a function of permanent damage. So if you can there are multiple things that can go into that, into erectile dysfunction. So I've certainly had to start testosterone on men who have officially low testosterone levels. But yes, you can actually improve that function if your A1C is over 7%, 8, 9, 10. chances are you're going to create a lot more circulation, a lot more flow, and just energy in general in your body, by bringing that A1C down below 6.5, 7%, depending on who's asking, which official society is asking the goal should be. But the closer you can get to 7 or lower, the more likely your body's to circulate. And I will say it's not overnight, because it's a percentage of your blood, and your body makes new blood every 3 months. So if you became perfectly religious about your sugars in your food tomorrow, it wouldn't start working better tomorrow, because it still has the 3-month-old blood that's in your system that needs to clear out. But 3 months from now, if you're still on point with your routine, you have a whole different set of insides now and a whole different kind of circulation. But you do have to clear out the last 3 months.
Okay. Here's another question from the chat from Stephanie. If someone has almost lost their eyesight or lost it completely due to diabetes, is it reversible with a lifestyle change?
You can improve it, but it is tough when things have officially, I would say a couple of things. One, I think the ophthalmologist is the best person to answer that, depending on what kind of vision problems you have. For example, I've had people get blurry vision because their sugars are in the 500s. Now that does get better. Like I always tell people, don't go get new glasses when they just get diagnosed, because your prescription is going to change. It's actually going to improve once you start to control your diabetes. But if depends on what's causing the blurred vision, if it's a permanent damage situation, chances are some of that permanent damage is not going to go away. I've had some of my favorite patients one guy who was a blues guitarist and really talented, but always eating all the barbecue, all the cornbread every time he went out to play. He was joking about it, but eventually he did have an amputation. Now we're not geckos. Like once that happens, it won't grow back. So once the damage is permanent, it doesn't correct, but you can prevent future damage. You can prevent worsening. So in terms of your eyesight, it depends on whether the loss of vision is a temporary thing or something that's due to a permanent situation. And then you can certainly either way prevent it from getting worse by getting control, turning around and facing and controlling the diabetes. It's not fun, but it's a lot of work. It's a whole job. But everybody kind of has their cross to bear, and yours or whoever's, the universal you, is to turn around and become a stronger person by facing it and taking control of it and reversing it if you can.
Okay. So a common question that we always hear is insulin and weight gain. Can you talk a little bit about that? Can taking insulin lead to weight gain? I think that's a concern for a lot of people. So if you can just share a little bit more about that, that would be helpful.
It's true. There are certain diabetes medications that are weight neutral or help with weight loss, like the ones I mentioned earlier. Those are the first and favorite ones that I go to. But if someone's sugar is out of control and at risk of causing blindness, kidney failure, or heart attack, then insulin is what I'm going to do. And yes, so it's not one of the weight neutral ones. It can cause some weight gain, but not like 50 points. Sometimes people will have a thyroid condition, and yes, it causes weight gain, but not like 5 pounds, not 25, 30, 50, 100 pounds. But that is further incentive to continue to work on improving the lifestyle things. Because, for example, even people who don't make any insulin anymore, if they go to exercise, they need to take less insulin that day, because their sugars might drop 50, 80, 90 points with the exercise. So I think it's further motivation to do anything that will reduce your body's need for insulin, if that's something that you can do. Because exercise is like this, insulin is like this key that unlocks it so that the sugars go into your muscles. And exercise is like this back door that has nothing to do with insulin. But once you crack it open and prop it open after 30 minutes, even if you sit down and don't move a muscle for the next several hours, it doesn't matter. Those muscles are clearing sugar out of your bloodstream. So it can put on weight, but it's better than blindness. And I like to think of it like a temporary medication to prevent emergencies while you work on other things.
Yeah, thanks for answering that. So, when it comes to diet, we know that's a really big component of just better managing diabetes. Um, just briefly, what are some like off limit foods that you would like to share that you've kind of seen help your patients?
Um, I like food, so I like to eat all the different foods. And I hate to say that anything is completely off limits, but if there is one thing, it's soda. There's like not one nutrient that's helpful in full sugar soda. And I know that's hard for some folks, but that's really the one thing that's strictly off limits. I honestly, I don't. There are some fruits that are higher in sugar than others. A lot of people will have a banana a day. Bananas and grapes are the highest sugar fruits. So if you can have the other things, there's a website called dietdoctor.com. And if you put in that, and if you Google dietdoctor.com and fruits, they have a pretty little graph that has like the lowest carb fruits to the highest carb fruits, and bananas are right there at the highest. But wouldn't say you shouldn't ever have one. But soda, there's really no good reason ever to have it. And now I don't know what kind of magic is in these flavored sparkling waters, but they don't even have fake sugar in them, but somehow they are sweet. So I think they've used technology and come a long way. It's worth trying out the different flavored waters to find one that you like. Some of them are so sweet I can't even have them, but my kid loves them. So it's worth trying other drinks if you can, but soda and juice is basically just liquid lollipops. So even if it says apple juice, it can be healthy, but I'd rather you just have the apple and some water.
Okay, so we have a few minutes here. I want to get one more question from the chat before we head into our tweets. Can diabetes reduce a woman's ability to reproduce?
Yes. So I do, as people start to improve their lifestyle, I have made sure to warn folks if they were not trying to get pregnant that they might actually become more fertile. So again, like other things, there could be a lot of things going on, but that's kind of what they think. That is part of what they think the part of the PCOS syndrome, polycystic ovary syndrome, and that's part of the lower fertility with that has to do with insulin resistance. Your body's making all this extra insulin to keep your sugars normal, and your body's responding to it by saying it's not safe right now for you to get pregnant. But then you reduce the body's need for insulin by reducing the carbs and going on a walk, and the next thing you know, we have to start talking about treating your pregnancy with different kinds of medications. So it can definitely be related.
Okay, let's get into some tweets. Oh my gosh, some sweets and tweets. We have a tweet we'd love for you to respond to. So can you read the tweet on the screen and just give us your thoughts?
Okay. It says, doctor says I got to be careful with beer with my diabetes. Why and how much can I have? Okay. So the reason that your doctor is talking about beer is that it's liquid bread. So that's why people who have gluten sensitivity or wheat sensitivity try to find the right kind of drink, because beer is just wheat and that's bread, and your body takes it in and turns it straight into sugar in your bloodstream. So you might as well have had the same amount of juice. So sometimes the light beers can have fewer carbs, but that's part of the reason why your doctor is saying that beer is kind of the worst. There are some things like, I don't want to give someone a whole list, but you could have like a gin and sugar-free tonic or something like that. There are other things that just do not have the same sugar punch as beer.
All right, let's get into another tweet.
All right. So it says, how can I deal with my diabetes during the holiday season? Like, I need my pie, but I don't want to die. I feel you. um, so, so a couple of things I think that, like I said, I do like food. And people bring food into the office. And sometimes you take a bite and you're like, this is totally worth it. And then sometimes you take a bite and you're like, I could live with or without this. And that's how I feel like people should try to approach the holidays too. If your auntie made something that is like your absolute favorite, save the carbs that you're going to have that day for that sweet potato pie. Actually, that same favorite patient who used to bring in her husband made the best sweet potato pie for the holidays. So, sorry, I'm thinking about the pie. Anyway, so you know, choose like your proteins and your greens and your vegetables most of the day, right? Have your eggs and your berries or something like that at breakfast time. And when you get to dinner and you know you're going to have that pie, that will be your big carb load for the day. So just choose intentionally. Don't just eat it because it's there or eat it because someone handed it to you. You could take a bite and say, oh, this is so good, I have to save the rest for later. And then save your carbs for the thing you really want. I mean, if you go out, Italian restaurant is another common example I use. So you go to the restaurant, they put bread on the table. You don't have to eat it. You might like the bread, but if you know they have your favorite cheesecake, pass on the bread, have the chicken and Brussels sprouts are like the new thing, and then have that special cheesecake at the end. That's where you're going to eat those carbs. So choose intentionally. You don't have to have all of them. And and if somebody's kind of giving you a hard time, try to let them know that I know you love me, but love me enough not to push this on me. I'm trying to do better with my diabetes.
Okay, well, thank you so much for those tips. So as we are winding down with this Ask the Doctor session, I'd like to know if you have any last words. Maybe you want to share some resources for those watching today.
Last words, I think just try to make small changes. Don't try to ignore it. It does not go away if you ignore it. Dietdoctor.com is a website that I like very much. And there are a couple of, there's a TED talk by Dr. Sarah Hallberg, who passed away recently, but she kind of breaks it down in that same way about, you know, if you have lactose intolerance, you avoid dairy, and the same way you should avoid starches if you have diabetes. Your life will be better and longer. And you don't know how bad you feel until you feel better. So actually it drains a lot of energy to push through those high sugars day after day. So you'll feel better by taking control of the situation.
Thank you so much, Dr. Kayla. I learned so much about diabetes, and I hope that all of those watching did too, and will use some of those tips and apply it to your everyday lifestyle. So now I will switch it over to Shamira.
Sorry, everyone. It looks like I was on mute, but I'm here. I am back. And I want to thank you all for joining. We had such great information. So thank you both to Valerie and Dr. Kayla for joining us today. And I want to take a moment just to sum up some of those points, because we are in the midst of holiday season and talking about diabetes and how different foods impact our blood sugar. You know, you heard the word carbohydrate come up time and time again. And the reason why you heard that word is because those carbohydrates or those starchy foods, when we eat those things, they break down into sugar. And when we hear sugar, it's very tempting to think about cookies and cakes and pies and sodas, as Dr. Kayla mentioned, but it's more than that. So when you think about those carbohydrate or starchy foods, we're also thinking about rice, in bread, in pasta, in beans, in winter squashes like butternut squash, and some of our fruits, milk, yogurt, all of those things. When our body breaks them down, it turns into sugar, and that goes into our blood. And so as we're going into the holidays, being mindful of how you're portioning your plate. It is not that you can't have them. I never want you to feel like you have to restrict yourself. You can absolutely have it, but it just goes back to how much and how you're filling your plate with other things. So some of those nice lean proteins like chicken, or if you like fish, if you like turkey, and then those non-starchy vegetables. So greens, collards, kale, carrots, you name it, all those fresh non-starchy vegetables. So I know that was a lot. And if you have any other questions, you can feel free to connect with us on our social channels to stay up to date. So you can find us on social media at Grapevine Health. You could also visit our website at grapevinehealth.com. I want to give a special thanks to Fairfax County Health Department and the entire Stronger Partnership, Stronger Community Initiative for supporting today's event. And don't forget the QR code right there. Take a moment to scan that and complete that survey before you log off. So again, special thank you to you all for joining. A thank you to our guests for sharing such great practical tips with us. And until next time, thank you from the Grapevine Health team.